welcome to the Cut, and in particular to the Science Café, and well done Umi for again setting up our evening this evening. A couple of points of admin, you don't want to hear from me, but just to say that, and a lot of you will have forgotten this, but I haven't travelled for a long time. Fire exits, there are two there, and there's one at the back, and there's one at the door that you went in. They're all lit up. Please, as we're about to take off, turn off your mobile telephones. That would be very kind of you to do that. And I would like to welcome tonight Dr. Jordi Asher, who's going to talk to us all about, we'll have to see in a moment. But prior to that, and it is about vision, I thought I'd dress appropriately because we're going to use our eyes this evening. And also to mention very quickly that I've not seen anything about what she's going to talk about, but I myself am a victim or actually a recipient of two intraocular things, and it's fantastic. So I threw away my glasses 6 years ago, and that's absolutely fantastic. So much is going on with vision worldwide. I travel to Nepal and to Bhutan a lot, and I see travelling clinics out there restoring vision to so many people. And this has happened in the past sort of 15 years or so, so it's happening all over the world. And now tonight, Jordi is going to talk to us about an even further and more interesting aspect of it. Jordi's going to speak for about 40 minutes. We're going to go straight into questions afterwards because she has a train to catch, so if we had a break and so on, that would dilute the situation, so I hope that's okay. If any of you need a comfort stop, please carry on, don't worry. Do whatever you need to do, but we will carry on here. We'll also be able to field technical questions after Jordi has gone, and she's also said, and Umi will be able to provide us with an email for contact for other questions, or if there are such and we've run out of time and somebody's got a burning issue, we can get in touch with Jordi and she'll be able to answer those. Without more ado from me, ladies and gentlemen, can I welcome Dr. Jordi Asher.
Thank you. I mean, just a point. I don't know if what I'm going to tell you about this evening is more important than the work going on in Nepal and Burma, but it is just as important. I have to point it. There we go. No, give me a second while I orient myself. Sean, next slide, please. Right, so I am Jordi Asher. I am currently employed at the University of Essex as a lecturer and as a vision scientist. Now, my PhD qualification says that I'm a Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology. I don't tend to tell people that I have a PhD in psychology because they generally will ask me to interpret their dreams or ask me if I know what they're thinking. No, I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what your dreams are. And so I tend to just say I'm a vision scientist. My research specifically focuses on the brain rather than the eyes. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about vision from the eye, but if you are an ophthalmologist or an optician or somebody who specializes in eyes, you probably know a lot more than I do. So if I make a mistake, feel free to boo me. For myself, I'm interested in plasticity in the visual brain. And that is because in 1996, at the tender age of 21, it's my violin, I had a stroke. And a result of the stroke was that I have damage to my visual brain, and this has affected my ability to see. So I have what's called visual field loss. And ever since I left the hospital, I'll tell you what happened. On the day I left, I was at the neurological hospital in Russell Square. The doctor said to me, he gave me a 3-page PDF and he said, "Oh, you're just going to have to get on with your life. There's not really anything that we can do." So I twaddled off with my 3-page PDF. And every time I ever spoke to anybody after that, whether they were an expert in speed reading was the one I remember speaking to, or any time I met a medical professional, I would always say, look, do you think it's possible for us to rehabilitate this vision loss that happens in the brain rather than the eye? And unfortunately, for about 20 years, everybody kind of just said no. When I enrolled at University of Essex to do my undergraduate in psychology, not mind reading, my intention was to go for a career change. At that point, I met the man who would become, hang on, there is a pointer here. It doesn't like me. That bald guy. I'm sorry. Can we go back, please? When I met Paul, I met him as a second-year undergraduate, and I was applying for research experience because as a student, I was really enjoying the research. And he said to me, are you interested in doing a PhD? And if so, what would you be interested in doing? And I said to him, well, I've had this burning question for 20 years. My question is, I really want to know if we can recover. Thank you. I'm going to test it now. There we go. Thanks, Sean. I really want to know if we can recover vision, when it's located in the visual brain. And he looked at me and he said, well, I think I can help you with that. And at that point, I had my PhD supervisor. He's Professor Paul Hibbard. He's an expert in 3D vision, and he's sorry he can't be here tonight. It's his wife's birthday, and they're off to Norway. So I have forgiven him for not being here. So along with visual field loss, I also do a lot of work in migraine and in binocular vision. And obviously I don't have time to talk to you about everything today. So today I'm going to focus on my passion, which is this idea of visual field loss. And so I can explain to you why it's important and to try to give you an idea of what it is. Yes. Before I tell you what it is, I'm going to tell you what we're going to tell you. This is a very university thing, right? Tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you I told you. Right. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction into the visual system, and this is both from the perspective of the eye and of the brain. We're going to talk a little bit about what types of visual field loss you have, why you have them, where they are located in the brain, and why they are so difficult to do anything with them. We're going to talk a bit about therapy, which we know if you have physiotherapy or language therapy, we know it's hard work, but we know that the brain is amazing and can often recover some of the lost function, and we're going to have a look at what happens in the visual brain when we do that. I'm going to talk to you a bit about my research about trying this training in the visual brain. Then I'm going to talk to you about the assistive technology that we're working on that will help people who have visual field loss. And finally, I'll take questions. But I know I'm going to give you all the information you need, so... But I'm nice. You can ask me questions. This is me, and that gorgeous man over there is my little brother. He took me to the Grand Canyon in 2017. And I think, as Christopher and I were talking before we started, he was telling me that, if he had to lose any sense, he would want it not to be his vision. Because vision, your sight, it is evolutionarily the key to human survival. It is the sense that allows us to navigate our environment, to source and locate food, determine whether it's ripe or rotten. It helps us identify objects, and it helps us recognize people. And yet it all seems so effortless. It just seems that it takes no effort at all. When in actual fact, there is quite a bit of effort when it comes to seeing. And it doesn't all end at the eye. So, Christopher was talking earlier about the fact that he had lens surgery, and I'm so glad that he could, because what happens if anybody is unaware about how the eye sees images? We have an image that comes through, hits the lens in the eyeball, is flipped upside down because of the curvature of the lens, and sent to the back of the eye, where what we call the fovea. Now, the fovea has lots of light-sensitive receptor fields, and it takes all this light information and it transduces it into lovely, juicy neural signals. Now, sometimes that point where the image falls at the back of the retina is, let's say if you have an eyeball that's slightly longer than most, or an eyeball that's slightly smaller than some, is that focal point over there might end up being over here or over there. And that's why we use lensed glasses. So by adding in an extra lens, we can manipulate, or opticians can, not me, where on the back of your eye the image that is in front of you falls. So it's all very well if you have some kind of visual impairment that happens before it hits the retina, in terms of where the image falls based on your lens. But we have some visual impairments that cannot be fixed before it hits the retina. If we saw exactly what an image looked like that just came from our eye, we would see everything upside down and crossways, because we would see the right part of the world on the left and the left part of the world on the right. So vision is not effortless at all, because our brains still take these images that are now upside down and back to front and make a combination. They combine those. Now, the way you can check this is that because of the difference between our two eyes, there we go, I can see people testing it already. Yeah, because of the distance between your two eyes, the image on your retina from each eye is ever so slightly different. And so what our brain does is our brain combines those two images, takes into account the distance, you can see the bit of the blur between there, and interprets that as 3D depth. Now, for a normal human, it's not to say I'm not normal, well, that's arguable, but you would have approximately 180 degrees. This one that adds up to 190 degrees of a field of view. So you can see about 5 degrees kind of outside of the 180. Anything you see straight in front of you is crisp, it's clear, it's in focus, you can see color. As you move out, things might get a bit more blurry. You might recognize, so for example, if I look straight in front, I know that there's some people there, but I couldn't tell you what they're wearing. As you get further out in the periphery, it gets more blurry. You see less color, you see less shape. But essentially, your field of view is, you can still tell there's something there. So, how is this happening in the brain? Right, so you have your two eyes view, your left eye and your right eye. And if you close one eye, you can see that your left eye, and I'm terrible with left and right, especially when I'm inverted, so don't laugh at me if I go my right eye and I'm holding my left eye. So if you take your left eye and you cover your left eye, you'll notice that you have the full view of your left peripheral vision, but you don't have the full view of your right peripheral vision, right? And if you do the other, you have the full view of your right peripheral vision, but not your left peripheral vision. And then you have the section in the middle where you have both left and right view, and a little bit in the periphery where you have a little bit of left and right. Okay, it's messy, I know, but I'm going to show you more pictures. That helps. So each eye captures part of the right eye's view, part of the right field and part of the left field. And you can follow these here by the purple line. So for example, the right field goes to the left visual cortex. So it crosses, as you can see here, at the optic chiasm. For the left eye, the right field doesn't cross, but it also joins on the left side of the visual cortex. So what you have is the left side of the visual cortex processing the right field's view for both eyes, and on the left eye and the right eye for the left side's view, you have both of them being processed by the right side of the brain. So does everybody, I've made an assumption here that everybody knows where the visual brain is. Anybody want to put your hand where the visual brain is? Go on. Yes. Yes. It's back here, right? That is where the visual cortex is, right at the back. And that's what you can say to people who say, we've been designed perfectly. What a ridiculous place to put your visual brain. So the point is that there is a really long journey for each of these eyes' views to get to the respective cortices. So we've got all the left visual field taking part in the right visual cortex. We've got all the right field of view happening in the left visual cortex, and that's for both eyes. So let's see what happens when we encounter some damage. Right, so the two that I've put in first, where you see black, that is inferring that there's damage. Where you see red, we're talking about the left visual field being processed in the right visual cortex. Where you see purple, we are talking about the right field of view being processed in the left visual cortex. Smart, huh? Okay, so both of these are visual impairments that are located in the eye. One of them at the top here, glaucoma, or if you know of retinitis pigmentosa, you can think of this as tunnel vision. So somebody might just see the central part of their field and not see anything else. In reverse, we've got the central scotoma. That could be something like macular degeneration or Stargardt's disease. What you'd have is somebody who's looking straight ahead of you. They won't be able to see what's in the middle. They'll only be able to see what's around the outside, which means you kind of have to look to the side to see what's in the middle. I imagine that's a very challenging impairment. Now, while neither of those are cortically damaged, there is still currently no real solution to helping people recover that. A lot of people are looking in terms of macular degeneration, doing some of the training things that we're going to talk about later on in the evening. But as yet, both of these cases, people still don't have a good prognosis. When we start to getting damage along the visual pathway, and because we've got so far to go from the eye all the way down to the back of the head, there are a lot of places where it can go wrong. So number 3, I've pointed out here, this is a monocular loss. So what we have here is on the optic nerve, we might have aneurysm or a brain tumor or any kind of damage that impedes onto that pathway. So what you have in this situation is you have the entire right side, or entire left side lost, the right field in the left cortex, right? So, but just of one eye, right? So if you close your eye and you imagine only having access to the one eye, you've got your field of view in both your left and your right side, but you've only got one eye. In this case, most people can still drive. They can still see depth because we do have monocular depth cues. But what we have here is no signals at all coming in from that eye. So you can just imagine deleting those pathways. Now, if we had some kind of damage here at the optic chasm, we know this is the point where the right eye goes to the left cortex and the left eye goes to the right cortex. So if we have damage there, what we have here is we have bitemporal damage. So you will still have the left eye's view going to the left and the right eye's view going to the right. But what you don't have is the cross between the two. So you might only just see what's right in front of you. You would have absolutely no peripheral vision and probably look something like that, although without having the top bit done. So you would literally only have the view from each eye in that small narrow field. Now we come on to one of the most common visual field loss. This is called Homonymous Hemianopia, and homonymous means it's the same damage on the both side. And so what we have here, for example, 5, there we go. That's wrong, isn't it? That should be red there. So, no, that is right. Yeah, that is right. The red is blind. So this is basically what I have. So what I have here is I have damage on my right visual cortex to the left field of view, right? So if I look straight ahead, and I'm going to look at you in your lovely pink top with the collar there because you're right in front of me. If I look straight at you, I can pretty much see everybody to the right, but the rest of the auditorium is, I can see somebody behind you is lifting their arm, but I don't know what they're doing. And I just know nobody else exists. You just don't exist in my world. It's just noise. Now you exist again. So what has happened is on both sides of my field of view, I have no left connections reaching the visual cortex. Another very common type of visual field loss is Quadrantenopia. And what you can see here on number 6 is that in this case, just a lower half of the right field of view, the left field of view in the right visual cortex has been damaged. So what a person who has Quadrantenopia would see is they would see everything above, everything to the right, but they would have no field of view in this area. And this is the same, but just reverse, somebody who's missing the top. So obviously there are going to be a lot of combinations of these types of visual field loss, and this can be exacerbated by whether or not there is still residual sight in the central vision. So for example, in my own case, my field loss encroaches right into my central vision. So I can be looking straight at you and not necessarily see the whole of your face. And what that means for me is that I definitely never ever will be able to drive ever again. And that we find is what people want to do the most. People want to drive. So hopefully everybody has seen one of these. Have you seen one of these? No, some people are shaking their heads. Right, this is a visual field perimetry. And you should get it every single time you visit your optometrist. You'll put your head in a box, you'll see a bowl, there'll be a red light flashing, and you'll have a clicker in your finger, and you'll have to click it every time you see the red dot. Mine looks something similar like that, because if the red dot ever flicks, I just don't see it. And what I would suggest is, if you've never done one of these, to request one next time you go to the optometrist. Because the sneaky thing about visual field loss is you don't always know you have it. because the brain is so smart. A perimetry or a visual field test, yes. They should be doing them. If not, you should definitely ask for it. So ask for a perimetry or a visual field test. And so very often this is what visual field loss is presented like. Because you will ask somebody, what do you see? And somebody will say, I see nothing. I see nothing. And nothing is interpreted as black. I've tried to do a rendering of how best I think I can portray what visual field loss looks like. Now I've depicted here my own. This doesn't include necessarily people who have tunnel vision or central vision loss. This is just mine, but you can assume something similar for all these other visual field loss types. What you see is it's kind of a summation of all the visual noise. All the visual information is there, but it's blurred. It's indistinct, but it's still there. I can still recognize that there's a light source coming from there. Every time the flash goes on from the top, I recognize the flicker. And yet I still could not tell you how many people are sitting on that side of the room. You get picked on a lot. I'm sorry, your fault for sitting in my blind spot. And so one of my missions really is to help people understand what it looks like. Because I've come across people who've said, you know, I've never asked for a perimetry because I just assumed that visual field loss would be black. And I don't see black. Of course you don't see black. People don't really see black. But we don't know necessarily that that field is missing. So when I woke up the morning after my stroke, I was just at home. I'd watched Jeremy Beadle the night before with my brother on his 21st birthday. And something just felt wrong to me. I didn't know what it was. I said, okay, look, I've got to get to hospital. I was living in Colindale in London. I had to take the train from Colindale to Edgware. On the way to the hospital, I nearly walked into a bus because I didn't see it. But I didn't know that I didn't see it because your brain is so good at filling in the information around you. So I have on YouTube, I have a blind spot demo that you can try. I did bring a demo in today. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work on the screen. So if we have time at the end, we can try it. And really what it does is it uses your own natural blind spot, which everybody has, that point where your optic nerve leaves your eyeball and goes to your brain. And the demo, I hope, shows people what it looks like in your blind field. And if we have time, we'll definitely do it. Do we have time? We're doing okay. Okay, so when we read, normally, you don't necessarily just read one word at a time. You tend to read in chunks. Right, so you might read a chunk here, and even though you're not necessarily cognitively reading this next few rows here, your brain has taken that into account as you read. So as you read, your eye naturally follows at a pace, and you almost have a prediction what's coming next, even though you're not necessarily reading it directly. Somebody who has visual field loss on the left, this is me, reading kind of looks like that. So I have to start with my eyes over here in order to read what's over here. I can't get the prediction from what's coming next. So I can't say, you know, in the next few lines, I already have this idea that this is coming back. So I literally have to read one word at a time. Although I can read the words in front a bit, but without that predictive prompt from reading the words in the other lines, it does take a lot of concentration. Now I'm the lucky one, right? Because people who have a blind field on the right side, they actually cannot read. They cannot read the lines, the words coming in front of them, without having to completely adjust where their eyes are. And so people who have blind field on the right find reading and writing especially challenging. So I hope with these I've shown you a little bit about how serious it can be to have visual field loss. And because it's a problem that's so difficult to find a solution for, pretty much nothing gets done. That's why the doctors of yesteryear said to me, there's nothing we can do, just get on with your life. But what we do find is we find that people with visual field loss, they have lower mobility. Now, you can look at me and you think, yeah, but you don't look disabled. People say that to me sometimes. It's true, I don't. I'm a lucky one. You know, I've been able to go out there. I've been able to pursue it. A lot of people can't. A lot of people are terrified to leave their homes. A lot of people fall, they trip, they hurt themselves. They're scared to go to new areas on their own. So what we tend to find with people with visual field loss, and it's a big problem, as you can see there, around 24% of all visual impairments are visual field loss. And an even more horrifying statistic is that out of everybody who has a stroke, and we know in the UK there's a stroke once every 5 minutes, approximately 60% of people will also have a visual impairment. So no matter where else your stroke is, if you have a stroke, God forbid you don't, the chance that you have visual field loss is pretty much half-half. You have a 50% chance of having visual field loss. And unfortunately, because you don't always know you have it, it's often not diagnosed. So what we have here is you can see a great cost to the UK economy of support by friends and family. We have people who have a higher rate of depression and mental illness, isolation, loneliness. And it gives me goosebumps to think of it, because when I think about the message that the doctors said to me, there's nothing we can do, get on with your life, people are still getting that message. I spoke just yesterday to an 82-year-old woman who was desperate to come and be a part of one of our trials, because that's the message that she's been getting. Nothing we can do, nothing we can do. So it's almost been like a personal mission of mine to do some work to try, and initially I wanted to recover it, rehabilitate it, and I'm going to show you now why that unfortunately didn't work out. So we spoke a little earlier about physiotherapy. Am I talking too fast? No, okay. We spoke a bit earlier about physiotherapy. Most people know about physiotherapy. You know about speech therapy, language retraining that helps if you have an aphasia. And there are a lot of good results if you continue to do these kinds of training. And so the question has always been, well, why can't we do the same for vision, physiotherapy? Let me tell you, if anybody ever offers you physiotherapy for visual field loss, say no thank you, it's a scam. I'm going to show you why. Right, so this is a bit sad, but it's also very important. We know that thanks to Hubel and Wiesel, who in the 60s, they did a lot of experiments on kittens. I know, it's hard. For some reason they do like cats. But what they did was they took kittens from birth and they either covered one eye, or they covered both eyes, or they left both eyes uncovered. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about what these cortice slice shows us, but basically what they found is if you cover both eyes of a cat while it's young, say 3 to 4 months, and then you take the blindfold off, they never are able to see, ever. So their eyes work fine, their brain is intact, but you can see that the pathways from the eye to the brain, because they've never been used, they never formed, and it just withers and dies. When they only covered one eye, that eye, the same thing. They were never able to see from the eye that was covered from birth. But when they covered the other eye after the 3-month period, they didn't lose their vision. So in that critical period between 0 to 3 to 4 months, all the visual pathways that they would need for the rest of their lives had been formed already. And when they took the blindfold off after 4 months, it was too late. It was too late for those visual pathways to then start working again. That one got lucky. No children have ever been blindfolded to give this finding, but we know the same is true. We know that the critical period for sensory development in children is about 6 to 7 years old. And by the time you've turned 6 or 7, all the information that you need for your visual pathways has already been set. If you don't have access to that in those first 7 years, then it's too late. Then it's not coming. But this is where it gets interesting. Because although we know about this critical period, we also know that people can get better at doing tasks, at perceptual tasks that require us to concentrate with vision. I've picked out a few of my favorites. This one is wine tasting, right? You can take people, complete amateurs, put them in a room and train them to be professional wine tasters, and they get better. Apparently, this is one of the most difficult tasks in the world, is telling the difference between a male and female chick. Can anyone in the room do it? No, I've never tried, but apparently it's nothing you can teach. There's no materials. There's nothing specifically you can point to and say, that's a boy, that's a girl. It's something that you have to be trained to do with a professional. You watch them, you observe them, and eventually you learn the skills to tell a baby chick apart. This one has been also been quite interesting. This one more practical, where they were teaching radiographers to pick up breast cancer just from visually looking at the scan. It's interesting, but how useful is it? So the thing about training is it's all very well being an expert in tasting wine, but that doesn't really help you sexing chickens, nor does it help you detecting cancer in, breast cancer, in what are the things you get? Radiographs. I just made that word up. And that's going to be the holy grail, right? Because it's no good, and a lot of the tasks that are used for training look a bit like this. In fact, I'm doing a study at the moment for Oxford University who are looking to see if you train in dot direction, those dots would be moving. And listen to me, I train for 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 6 months. Do you improve your vision? Now, I don't think so, but I'm doing the study anyway. The question is how useful is any of this? Does telling the distance between these lines, or which direction these patches are moving in, or how close these bars are, does that actually help me get better at anything other than that task? It's not really very useful. And so while there is some evidence that this motion training, this is what I was telling you I'm doing, look how long people have to train for to get even a teeny tiny little bit of improvement. 2 years doing 40 minutes a day of left and right dot discrimination. I think what's happening is people are getting better at making a decision. And this is the debate about how useful perceptual learning and vision training and things like physiotherapy are. Because what's not happening is we are not seeing changes at a neural level. We are not seeing pathways trying to find another way to reconnect, like you would in physiotherapy or language therapy. What we do find is that even though people get better, it's not something that they maintain for a long period of time, and it's not something that helps on any other task than dot discrimination. So I could have a PhD in dot discrimination, really and truly. So we come back to the place where we've started, where I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do, just get on with your life. And so before we came in, Nikki over there was asking me, how did I get an idea for an assistive technology? And this is what we're working on at the University of Essex at the moment. We hope to use augmented reality. At the moment, we're using virtual reality to trial out an assistive technology that is bespoke for people with visual field loss. So it doesn't help you if you have a problem with your lenses, or if you need a problem with magnification, or any other of the optical-based visual impairments that people might have. This is only for people with visual field loss. I mean, you can try it if you don't, but you won't really see the point of it. So these are called Fresnel Prisms. I don't know if anybody's ever seen them before or tried them before, but they were designed by a gentleman at Harvard called Eli Pelli. I had a job offer from him, but I turned him down to stay at Essex. True story. So what they do is they shift the information that's in your blind field. So if we say that this is the person's blind field, that prism there shifts what's there into your sighted field. Oops. So what you can see here is you can see the bottom of the door, which would be what was on that field, and you can see this door and this door that would be over here. Now, it's a great idea in principle, but in practice, it's a bit like Marmite. People either love it or they hate it, and most of them hate it. So the uptake is very low, and it's because not only does the shifted information cover what is in your sighted field, but it distorts it as well. So things are never really where they appear. So you can learn to wear them, and some people get on quite well with them, but they're not ideal. People report having nausea, disorientation, even more falls. That's not something that we want. You can't use them at night. You can't use them with sunglasses, and you have to be very careful when you're mobile. So what we know about people with visual field loss is, as you can see from me, I don't need something when I'm sitting down to help me see better. What I need is something that tells me what's in my blind field as I'm going shopping, or as I'm walking down the busy street, or as I'm trying to figure out how to get to platform 1 at Ipswich to get to Halsford, because what? It's one of them's behind the other. Like, anyway, those are the things that people with visual field loss need help with. And so this is where Paul and I got our idea for our assistive technology. And it's based on the concept of the rear view mirror. And it's based on Eli Pelli's Fresnel Prisms. We want to take what's in the blind field, put it in the sighted field, teach people how to use what we call the support window, much like you would use a rear view mirror in a car to inform you what's in all the places. But we don't want to distort it. We don't want to completely overlay what's already there. And most importantly, most importantly, we want to make it affordable. We don't want people paying a lot of money. Competitor, that shall remain unnamed, is currently on the market for £6,000. A pair of smart glasses for people with visual field loss. I haven't tried it. I do know that somebody has said to me, well, how it works is it minifies everything. So again, objects are closer than they appear. What we really want is we really want to think about people who want to be moving. They want to be mobile. This is our idea. We want to take what's in somebody's blind field, put it in their sighted field, and this isn't ideal, but I've tried to make it as transparent as I can. So we would expect that people would be able to choose the opacity that works for them. They might be able to choose the coloring, they might be able to choose the positioning. They would be able to configure it however they need for their own visual field loss. I've done this based on what I would need. And you can see here, if you're walking along and you may not necessarily be paying attention to what's in your blind field, you've got a potential child hazard there that might run out, give you a shout. You've got a post box or something that you might bump into or trip or fall into. And so what we hope is by giving people this clue into what might be in their blind field that they would have to worry about, we hope that they will feel a lot more confident in navigating busy spaces. And I love this picture because so much is happening in it. I use it all the time. Right, I'm going to check the time. I'm supposed to be finished, right?
Keep going. You're all right. No, keep going.
I have to speed up.
Will suffer,
Should I stop? Right, so what we wanted to do is, before we spent a lot of money investing in software, we wanted to do a proof of concept. So we used a task that is quite often used in the medical profession, especially when you have people with visual neglect, and that is to ask people to bisect a line. Take the line and mark it exactly in the middle. What we did is we put a fake blind spot. So we used control participants and made a fake blind spot and said, right, bisect the line. Now, the reason why we used a line bisection task is because it has been shown that when you use control participants with a fake scotoma, with a fake blind field, that they perform in a very similar way to people who have neglect or have visual field loss. We thought, hey, this is great. So we brought 30 people into the lab. We made them bisect the line in 3 conditions. They were either left blind or right blind. I tell you something, doing a right blind task is very funny for me because I'm already left blind. When there's a right blind, yeah. Funny story. The same with our VR simulation. Right. So we asked people to do the task as a baseline. And let me tell you, people were excellent. We've got some people who got absolutely spot on in the middle by pixel. But as soon as we did that, we found, as predicted, that people took 2 strategies. They would either bisect the line there, or they would bisect the line there. That's what you expect. Some people were a bit random, but not as many as I thought would be. Then what we did is we added the window, the support window. We said, right, if this is your support window, and you can see that this is your plane of reference, you can see here how long the line would be. Given this information, where do you think the line would be bisected? And we were very pleased. I mean, I don't know how many of you enjoy graphs or plots. This is a violin plot. I love plots because I think they give a good visual description. But if I can summarize for you what we're showing is we had 3 types of lines. We had very short ones, kind of medium ones, and very long ones. And what you're seeing here in the blue is where we had a scotoma or a blind field, and the pink is where we had the blind field and the window. And what I've measured here is deviation from the center. So the lower the point, the closer to the middle they actually are. And what you can see here is in all cases, people were closer to the middle in the condition where they had the scotoma. Now, granted, they're not as massive as I'd like. But then we had to ask ourselves, how realistic is a line bisection task? People aren't really going around the world bisecting lines. So we wanted to come up with something a little bit more real world. We had the idea, yes, our concept is going to work, let's expand it. And this is where we went to Immersive Studios in Norwich and we said, look, we want to do a real world task. We want to do something where people are going blind. Sean! Where people are doing tasks that are more real world. I'm not saying people go around building Tetris blocks, but there's some good science behind why we would do something like this. Because what we have here is we have the color is a bit difficult for you to see, but what we have here is we have various shapes and various colors of, thank you, of shapes that people would need to build. And we would have some distractors, and we would have, you can see I've got over here, some distractors and some pieces that will be built in the puzzle. I'm going to show you what it looks like. We ask people to build it with pieces, for these pieces lying on a table. And we can watch where their eyes go. We can watch how they locate pieces. Do they automatically go for the E, which looks a bit like the green L, or do they accidentally grab the C, which looks a bit like the blue E? So we can pay very close attention in virtual reality where people are aiming. We can tell where they're looking, and we can also tell in a bit more detail how they use the support window. So this is the initial diagram that I gave Immersive Studios. The two of them are sitting there, over there, taking pictures of me. And I said to him, this is roughly what I have in mind. I have people seated at a table, and what we want is we want to have the pieces splattered around, some outside of the field of view, some inside of the field of view, and they would have to replicate the puzzle that they see on the wall in front of them. So, can you play, please, Sean? This is a screencast from virtual reality of what one of our earlier renderings of our virtual reality simulated environment of what our HUD will look like. It's not perfectly accurate, because obviously if you're left blind, you're not going to put your HUD in the left where you can't see anyway. But you can just assume that maybe the blind spot is there. What you can see is that somebody who has a blind field can use a quick reference to maybe identify by shape or size or color where a piece might be in their visual field. And this is exactly what we're going to start testing in the next couple of weeks. So in the first instance, we will start with control participants, people who don't have visual field loss, and we will assess how they perform inside virtual reality. I have about 30 to 40 people who are absolutely desperate to participate. These are people with visual field loss. Some of them call me every week saying, when are we going to start? When are we going to start? But what do we want to do? We want to make sure that it's safe. We want to make sure that people can go in there, they can go through the whole experiment. So what would happen is we have around 30 preset shapes. The individual would go and build the shape. If you have visual field loss, we would only give you the HUD condition, the support window. If you don't have visual field loss, we do one condition with a fake scotoma, one condition with a fake scotoma, and the HUD, like we did with our line bisection. And we're going to look at where do people look, how fast are they at finding and clicking together various pieces. And we really want to get an idea of how useful this heads-up display is. Once we've done that, our intention is to move to augmented reality. These are exactly the pair that we are developing for at the moment. And what we've decided to do is use consumer augmented reality, because the driving force behind what I want to do is keep it affordable to people, make sure people are not having to invest £6,000. At the moment, these headsets will still cost around £800. Yes, it's still too much. I'm quite sure they're going to come down, but the idea is that you will be able to walk around with a fairly comfortable, not goofy goober looking type of headset that is going to make you a target for prankers or that make your friend think you're a bit weird or anything like that. We'd really like to make it lightweight and super portable. And so that's where we're going, money dependent. We've got lots of funding grants in. We're waiting to see, if anybody wants to support us in doing that. But first we have to finish our virtual reality testing. So that's again what it would look like. This is a team, myself, my PhD supervisor and now co-inventor of ARI. And these are our knowledge exchange managers, Emma and Anya. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can contact me at ari@essex.ac.uk, or if you have questions, or if you know anybody who has visual field loss and just wants to talk to me, I am very happy to talk to people, to take questions, to talk about what support we can offer. Other than that, I would like to thank you very much for having me. It's been absolutely wonderful. I've been looking forward to this for about, I don't know, since early December. So it's been really great. Thank you so much. Sorry for running over.
Because Jordi's got to get on the train and set off south, we're going to get straight into questions now for those who would like. We have a roving microphone, and Jordi's got 15 minutes before it's on your mark to get going. So please, from the audience, there's somebody there with a microphone who will be ready to point out if any questions.
We have to put it on ×2 speed.
Ready to go? 1, 2, 3. When you're creating these glasses, you're creating a window on the screen. Why are you not just going to the complete window, filling the screen so they see the complete view in the glasses?
That's a really good question, and there actually are some devices that do that already, especially the virtual reality headsets, which can just take everything in and manipulate it that way. There's two reasons why we're not doing that. The first is that nothing comes through as quickly as it does in real life. So with the augmented reality headset, you can see through it just like you can through a normal pair of sunglasses. But the other reason, and that's specific to people with visual field loss, is they can see something. They can see a lot of the world. What they're missing is just a small part of it. And the rest is there. So I think it's very important that people still are able to maintain using the visual field they have intact. Because for visual field loss, we really want to make the field bigger rather than smaller. Does that answer your question? And I think this is another important thing is we're not actually designing any more hardware. We're just designing the software. We're designing the idea that we can have a rear view type mirror in augmented reality or virtual reality like we're testing now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
I was just interested when you were talking about the prisms, and in fact, you know, the prism image sort of counteracted the real image of the person. But I was wondering, going back to, I think I did a unit of psychology when I was at university, there are those sort of pictures that you see where you can flick between the two. You know, you learn to flick between the two. I mean, there's the sort of old woman and the young woman, isn't there? And you can choose to flick. Is that not possible for people to learn?
With prisms?
Yes.
No. Because the prism literally shifts the image over what's there. So you don't see what's there anymore. It completely overlays that information.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So it's not, you know, you can't, this is the other issue about prisms, is once the prism is set, the field of view that it covers and the place that it shifts it to is set forever. You can't take your prism off. You can't say, okay, switch off now. The prism is always there, and the position in which it covers is always fixed.
Oh, so you don't see the two images and one interferes with the other?
No.
You actually see the prism
You actually
image.
only
I
see the filled in what's in my blind field.
Yes, I see.
And that can make it quite confusing. I mean, there were some pictures that I thought I might show you, but just even explaining them bent my head. Because, you know, when you have it one up and down and then you've got this shift.
Yes, yeah.
I've never personally tried prisms myself. I was never offered them. I think, you know, when I had my stroke back in the day, they probably weren't very, you know, well known then.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
You made the point about reading left to right and therefore being a problem depending on which hemisphere is affected. this is maybe a bit a weird question, but are Chinese people with vertical writing less disabled as a consequence? And the characters are more of a word rather than a letter?
I don't know, is the answer.
That's an excellent answer.
What I do know is, having spoken to people in China, they think there's a real market for something like this. And what they were saying to me is that currently people who have disabilities that aren't supported by current technologies are left really at home. They don't get out. And so in the short term, this technology as it is not going to help with reading. And that's because when you read, you're not going to physically look up in the window to find your place on something else. But that's not to say that we haven't got really great ideas about using artificial intelligence in the future to make these kinds of predictions. You've got text-to-sound converters. There are all sorts of things that you do have. So I think in terms of reading right now, our solution is not going to help anybody, whether they read in English, Spanish, or Chinese. I think your question is a good one, though, so thank you.
Any more?
You can ask more questions. I like them.
Jordi, could I ask a question?
Please.
While people gather their thoughts.
Well, I think.
Is the explanation you have to give to a person who's had a stroke and is trying to work out what's going on, how much sort of is the re-education process on explaining to them what you've been showing us tonight? Is that a very complex process?
I don't think there is any explanation. So what happens is if you're lucky enough to be one of those people who has had a diagnosis of visual field loss after stroke, and I say that because it's highly undiagnosed, especially if there is damage somewhere else. That tends to take priority, and very often the visual field tests are not conducted. So if you're lucky enough to be one of those people who has had somebody say, right, you have visual field loss, you are given approximately, these days, 1 year support with an orthoptist. Now, in the first year after you have a stroke, there is a good possibility that your vision will come back. If after 1 year you haven't had any of your vision bounce back, then it is gone for good, and there's no amount of anything that will help. And I get angry with people selling that physiotherapy, because I know people have spent a lot of money, doing this dot training. So I think it's a very difficult one. It's a difficult one because medical practitioners don't understand what visual field loss looks like, especially when they think it's just black. It's difficult because as somebody who has visual field loss, you may not know you have it. I was talking to a practitioner. I'm going to go off on a tangent a bit. I talked to a lot of people about, what we need and how we can make it better and who's going to buy it and what do they want. And she was telling me that she was speaking to the wife of an 82-year-old tractor driver who kept knocking off his side view mirror of the tractor. And she brought him in for an eye test, never had an eye test in his life before. And he had glaucoma, so he had a massive blind spot in his peripheral vision, and he just never knew. And he probably had it, most of his life. But because your brain is so good at filling in these blanks, it's very difficult to know you have it. So it's very difficult to tell somebody there's something wrong with my vision. It's not like, when you pick up a book and you can't read. So I think there's a really great professor at Liverpool, Dr. Fiona Rowe, and she really is leading the change in terms of how medical professionals can better support people with visual field loss. The biggest problem is at the moment there's still very little we can do. Although I do see people doing things like biomedical engineering in the US. That sounds quite fun. If you have a biomedical chip, does that make you a cyborg?
Jordi, I just thought it would be quite interesting for the people who come to Science Cafe if we did a little mini survey. And so could everybody who has had a visual field loss assessment put their hand up compared to how many people go to the optician and haven't had one? You know, perhaps we'd get more funding for your sort of work if we all knew more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw very few hands go up actually for the. I know the feeling. Yeah. I've never not had a visual field test after my stroke. Before my stroke, I never even knew what a visual field test was. So I mean, I don't want to scare anybody, because it's not like I want you to go off and think, oh my goodness, you know, I might have a missing field. But I think it would be good practice if you've never had one to just do it, so that you know, especially if you're accident prone or you think you're just clumsy. You never know. Maybe you're not. Maybe there's a little chunk missing. People think I'm very clumsy. I'm always tripping over things.
Hello.
Hello.
This is probably nothing, it's not relevant at all, but our daughter had a stroke 9 years ago or so at the age of 36. And since then, she can drive, but she has difficulty reading. And is that likely to be a visual problem or a brain problem?
She has difficulty breathing.
Reading.
Oh, reading.
Reading.
Breathing.
No, I don't think breathing.
Reading. So yes, that's definitely going to be a brain problem. That's definitely going to be in one of the language areas.
Yeah, she's got aphasia and goodness knows what as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she can drive means that she would have had a visual field test, I hope. And her visual field has been assessed to be. Did she have to take a visual field test after she had her stroke in order to maintain her license?
We don't know.
Ah.
I don't know. My wife has taken one because she has macular problems.
Yeah.
Not age-related degeneration, but well, it's not. Well, it wasn't. Might be now.
I mean, the reading, yes, is definitely a brain problem.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I know very little about language and reading rehabilitation. I tend to just focus on the back bit of the brain.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Can she read the road signs?
I assume so. She can read small snippets of
Yeah. Interesting. So she can read the words and not understand the meaning, or yeah, I know. Because those might be two different things, right? It could be that she can read the word, but she doesn't maintain the meaning as each word progresses on. And those would be different things. Yeah. I'm really sorry that she had a stroke.
Are there any more for any more? I'm just conscious of the time. Jordi is sort of limbering up to compete with Usain Bolt.
Yeah, my 12-year-old son is at home by himself this evening, so I do have to make it back.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can conclude. I think that was absolutely fascinating, judged by some of the questions too. You know, really, and probably people would ask more. Oh, why? Oh, I've got a bit of It often promotes that talk, but I found that absolutely fascinating. And as I said, as I started off at the beginning, having had that done to myself, and then seen it in operation, and now look where we're going with this sort of technology. It's absolutely fantastic too. Jordi, well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Really, really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, you can still put your questions on a piece of paper like you normally would have, and they can be sent to me. I'm happy to engage with people.
So finally, in conclusion, if I just say thank you very much to the Science Café team. Brilliant put on this evening. That was great fun. And of course the Cut staff who've laid us on for this evening. Great. Thank you very much indeed. Immersive Studios, that was brilliant. Jordi, fantastic.
Thank you.
Very much indeed. Really, really good.
I'll derobe from my microphone then. Shh.